All right, folks. Tonight we step into the raucous, smoky, and faintly sticky world of the medieval tavern. The beating heart of every village, the unofficial hub of gossip, and the only place where a knight, a farmer, and a bard could all get equally drunk and equally robbed. It wasn't just somewhere to drink. It was a place where danger, laughter, and disease shared the same air beneath a sagging thatched roof. Before we dive in, take a moment to hit like and subscribe, but only if you truly enjoy what I create. Drop a comment telling me where you're watching from and what time it is for you. It's always fascinating to see the mix of people tuning in from around the globe. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan to add that gentle background hum, and let's slip into tonight's journey together. You've slogged through a muddy street reeking of horse, smoke, and questionable soup. The rain has just ended, or maybe it hasn't stopped at all, leaving everything slick, including your only pair of shoes. You're tired, hungry, and have narrowly avoided being flattened by a cart of turnips. You need a drink. But how do you find a tavern in a medieval town? There are no neon signs, no Yelp stars, and definitely no GPS. What you do have are your ears. Follow the noise. Beyond the blacksmith's clang and the fishmonger shouting about his fresh river eels, you hear it. Laughter, shouting, and someone aggressively singing about a goose. Then you see it, a crooked wooden structure, leaning as though even the building has had one too many. Above the door swings a weathered sign with a crude painting of something. A barrel, a bear, maybe both. Doesn't matter. You've arrived. The front step is slick with spilled ale. You push open the heavy, iron-hinged door, and it lets out a groan so long and dramatic it could be sold as entertainment. Warm air and the intoxicating blend of smoke, wet wool, stale beer, and mystery meat slam into you like a drunken handshake. You've made it. Inside, the ceiling is low enough for tall men to duck and drunk men to smack their heads. The floor isn't metaphorically dirty. It's literal earth, covered in straw in a half-hearted attempt to pretend it's clean. It isn't. There are no private booths, no waiters with menus, and no such thing as quiet conversation. A medieval tavern has only two modes, loud or closed because it burned down. You snag a spot on a crooked bench near the hearth. It's wet with something. Best not to ask. Nearby, a man argues over a stolen chicken. Another snores with a ladle clutched in his fist. A one-eyed dog gnaws on a bone under the table like he owns the place. And that's just the entrance. The smell? Less fragrance and more emotional assault. Sour ale, old sweat, damp straw, and a ghost of boiled onions. The crowd hums like a living organism. Laughter bursts in one corner, while two men shout about the price of pigs. A mug slams down, spilling half its contents. No one blinks. The dirt floor squelches in ways you don't want to describe. You take a cautious step. The tavern is chaos, but it's warm, raw, and alive. A medieval community center with 400% more shouting and 0% hygiene. You find a seat. It's a bit damp, probably cursed, but for now, it's yours. Upstairs, past slanted floors and beams low enough to test your skull's durability. The rooms are small, cold, and absolutely shared. Privacy doesn't exist. You're sleeping shoulder to shoulder with strangers, some snoring like church bells, others dreaming loudly in languages you've never heard. Beds, Technically, most are straw, stuffed mattresses, thin, lumpy, and crawling with what medieval folks fondly called companions. You lay down fully clothed, boots on, dagger under your pillow, not for comfort, but for defensive strategy. Blankets are shared, so are smells. And if someone had garlic earlier, someone always has garlic. It will become an intimate part of your dreams. If you're too poor or too drunk for a room, you sleep downstairs, on a bench, under a table, or just in a corner by the hearth, curled up next to a dog that may or may not belong to the tavern. You'll be stepped on, probably sneezed on, and maybe used as a footrest. The tavern never really quiets, even after the last mug is drained and the last fight patched up. There's always someone muttering in their sleep, a log popping in the fire, or a distant fart echoing through the rafters. And yet, somehow, you drift off. It's not comfortable. It's not clean, but it's safe enough. The fire keeps the worst of the cold away. The tavern keeper keeps watch with one eye open and a club in hand. And the noise becomes its own kind of lullaby. Familiar, human, alive. You'll wake with a sore neck, a dry mouth, and a questionably acquired bruise. But for a few hours, you sleep in the company of travelers, rogues, farmers, and fools. No kings, no silence, just snoring, straw, and the faint hope your boots are still there come morning. Dawn creeps in like an uninvited guest, sliding pale light through the cracks in the shutters and poking at your eyelids with merciless persistence. The tavern has changed overnight. Not quieter exactly, but quieter in a defeated sort of way. You open one eye. Someone's boot is on your chest. Someone else is mumbling in their sleep about sheep taxes. The bard is snoring under a table, clutching his lute like a lover. A chicken hops across the floor, pecking at yesterday's bread crusts. No one questions where it came from. The fire has died down, leaving the room cold and smoky. A few patrons begin to stir, groaning like wounded warriors from battles fought entirely inside their own skulls. One man sits up, looks around, and lies back down, having decided today isn't worth it. The tavern keeper is already up because of course they are clattering mugs, sweeping straw into fresh piles, reheating something in a pot that smells both inviting and slightly vengeful. They shoot a look at the bodies on the floor, then bang a ladle against a mug like a morning bell from hell. Up or out, that's your wake-up call. There's no breakfast buffet. If you're lucky, there's more pottage now, even thicker than last night. Bread is rewarmed. Ale is watered down, and no one has the strength to complain. Some patrons just dunk their heads in a barrel of rainwater outside and call it clean living. You check your pouch, 2 coins and a button. Better than expected. Your boot's still here. One of them has a bite mark, but they're yours. A win. A few new faces trickle in. Early risers, travelers, workers in need of a drink before dealing with livestock, taxes, or worse, neighbors. The tavern begins to stir again, like a beast slowly waking. Someone starts retelling a story from last night. It's already changed, of course. Now there were 2 fights, and the bar song summoned a ghost. Everyone nods like it's gospel. The night was chaos. The morning is groggy, grimy, and full of regret. And yet you smile, because somehow you survived it. By now, you felt the sweat, the smoke, the sticky ale under your boots. You've survived the shouting, the flirting, the pottage, and possibly a flying bench. And through all that, one thing becomes clear. The medieval tavern wasn't just a drinking hole. It was the beating heart of the community. In a world with no phones, no newspapers, no social networks, the tavern was where news traveled. A merchant from the coast could share gossip from a foreign port. A soldier could describe the war from the front. A bard could sing songs that stitched people together, even if the lyrics changed every night. This was a place for connection. Farmers drank beside craftsmen. Pilgrims shared bread with thieves. Strangers became friends, or at least drinking buddies before the second round. Here, social classes blurred. Rumors were born, alliances were made, and grudges were buried or fueled further, depending on how the dice rolled. The tavern was also where business happened. Deals made, contracts shaken over splinters and spilled cider. It was a court, a confessional, and a theater stage all at once. You could find a job, lose your purse, get married, or start a feud in a single evening, and it offered something else too. Something you couldn't buy at the market or pray for in a chapel. Relief from the cold, from the work, from the endless seriousness of surviving medieval life. For a few hours, you could sit near a fire, hear a bad joke, sing a worse song, and forget just briefly how hard the outside world was. Even if the ale was warm, the bed was itchy, and the food had more bones than broth. The tavern gave you a sense of being alive among the living. And in an age where everything from disease to war to a sharp winter could take you without warning, that was no small thing. So when you stepped into a medieval tavern, you weren't just buying a drink. You were buying belonging, story, and maybe, if the floor wasn't too crowded, a place to sleep where the fire still burned. Because long before cafes and pubs and coffee houses, there was the tavern. Loud, dirty, honest, and absolutely unforgettable. Before she became the most iconic face of ancient Egypt, immortalized in a limestone bust with high cheekbones and a gaze frozen in serene confidence, Nefertiti was a woman cloaked in mystery. Her name means the beautiful one has come, but no one knows exactly where she came from. Some believe she was the daughter of a powerful Egyptian official named Ai, possibly even the sister of Akhenaten. Others argue she was a foreign princess sent to Egypt in a marriage alliance. Her origins are debated, but her influence is undeniable. Nefertiti appears in the historical record like lightning, sudden, brilliant, and transformative. She enters Akhenaten's life not as a passive queen, but as an equal partner in a reign that would shake Egypt's religious and cultural foundations. Together, they would dismantle centuries of tradition, discard the pantheon of gods, and elevate the sun disk Aten as the one true deity. It was a radical, near-heretical move. And Nefertiti wasn't just watching from the throne. She was leading ceremonies, making offerings, even depicted in art smiting enemies, a role typically reserved for male pharaohs. Unlike other queens, who were relegated to the background, Nefertiti was ever present. She appears in more artwork from the period than even Akhenaten himself. In these depictions, she isn't cloaked in subservience. She stands tall, sometimes larger than life, holding power quite literally in her hands. And in a society where pharaohs were divine, her proximity to Akhenaten, both spiritually and politically, suggested something more. Perhaps she wasn't just queen. Perhaps she was co-ruler. But this rise wasn't without tension. Egypt was not ready for the upheaval. The old priesthood resented the loss of their gods and temples. The capital moved to a new city, Akhenaten, today known as Amarna. cutting ties with the old ways. And through it all, Nefertiti was there, her figure etched into stone walls, her name sung in hymns to the sun. Yet for all her visibility in life, her death is a complete vanishing act. No tomb, no body, no confirmed end, just silence. It's as if history, after showcasing her brilliance, suddenly chose to look away. And that perhaps is where her legend truly begins. To understand Nefertiti's rise, you must first meet the man who changed everything, Pharaoh Akhenaten. He wasn't born with that name. He was originally Amenhotep IV, a prince in line with a 1,000-year legacy of gods and tradition. But something shifted inside him. Some call it divine inspiration, others say madness. When he became king, he turned his back on the mighty god Ammon and declared a new truth. There was only one god worth worshiping, the sun itself, the A10. This wasn't just a religious shift. It was an earthquake that cracked the bedrock of Egyptian civilization. Imagine a society built around temples, priests, and rituals being told overnight that their gods were false, their worship obsolete. Akhenaten didn't just preach monotheism, he enforced it. The temples of Amun were shut down. His name was chiseled off monuments. Statues were smashed. Entire cities were abandoned. In their place, Akhenaten built something new, Akheton, a city dedicated solely to Aten, where the sun would rise directly between the cliffs and bathe the city in sacred light. And through it all, Nefertiti stood at his side, not as a silent consort, but as a full participant. In the reliefs of the period, she's shown worshiping Aten with the same reverence as Akhenaten. Their daughters are often depicted with them, heads tilted toward the radiant sun. It was a family portrait, unlike anything in Egyptian art before or since. Even the style of the art changed. No longer stiff and formal, but loose, exaggerated, sometimes even intimate. The king and queen, kissing, playing with their children, praying in soft robes beneath the sun. Nefertiti was everywhere in this new world. At times, she even overshadowed her husband. Some historians believe she held real political power, maybe even acted as co-regent. There are inscriptions that refer to her as Neferfrotan, a name some believe she used when she began ruling in her own right. It's unclear if Akhenaten shared the throne out of love, strategy, or necessity, but it was clear. Without Nefertiti, this revolution may not have held together as long as it did. But revolutions are fragile. The gods don't take kindly to being replaced. And the people, they were quietly watching, waiting for the old order to return. By the height of her influence, Nefertiti had become more than a queen. She had become an icon, not just of beauty, but of divine femininity and royal power. Egypt had seen great queens before, Akhmos, Nefertari, Hatshepsut, but Nefertiti's presence felt different. She wasn't ruling from the shadows or taking power through war. She was reshaping the spiritual and cultural fabric of Egypt beside her husband in real time as a living goddess. She bore Akhenaten 6 daughters, Meritatan, Mekartatan, and Kaisen-Parton, and others, all of whom were frequently depicted in family scenes beneath the rays of Eden. Curiously, no sons were ever confirmed. In a kingdom obsessed with lineage, this was both a political problem and a historical mystery. Was it fate, or was something else at play? Some suggest Akhenaten may have had sons with other wives, or even more controversially, with Nefertiti herself, fueling modern speculation and uncomfortable theories that range from the speculative to the salacious. What is certain is that motherhood was central to her image. In art, Nefertiti is portrayed cradling her children, their tiny arms reaching up to touch her cheeks. These aren't stiff, cold statues. These are living moments carved in stone, intimate, emotional, radiant. In an age where pharaohs were often distant gods, Nefertiti's portrayal as a nurturing mother softened the divine, making it human. Yet, there was another side to her iconography, one far more powerful. In multiple depictions, Nefertiti wears the blue crown usually reserved for male rulers. She is shown smiting enemies, riding chariots, making offerings without Akhenaten beside her. These were not symbolic gestures. This was a queen performing the sacred duties of a king. It suggests a quiet but radical truth. Nefertiti may have been preparing for something more than partnership. She may have been preparing to rule. Whispers in history suggest that after Akhenaten's health began to decline, possibly due to genetic disorders or stress, Nefertiti took on more governing responsibility. But this is where the record starts to fade. In the final years of Akhenaten's reign, she vanishes from the public eye. No fanfare, no funeral inscriptions, no confirmed burial. Did she die young? Did she fall from power? Or was she about to become something even greater than a queen? Something history tried and failed to erase. One day, Nefertiti was everywhere, etched into walls, praised in hymns, ruling alongside a revolutionary pharaoh. And then, like a breath in the desert wind, she vanished. No ancient Egyptian queen had ever been so visible. Yet around year 12 of Akhenaten's 17-year reign, the records grow eerily silent. Her name disappears from the inscriptions. Her image fades from the art. No tomb, no death announcement, no mourning scene. For a woman so central to Egypt's cultural upheaval, her absence is more than strange. It's a black hole in history. So, what happened to her? One theory suggests the simplest answer. She died. Childbirth was risky, even for royalty. Nefertiti's second daughter, Machartan, also disappears from records around this time, possibly indicating a dual tragedy. A mother and daughter lost in the same dark moment. But if that were true, why no elaborate funeral, no tribute, no temple? This was a woman revered like a goddess. A quiet death doesn't fit the script. Others proposed something far more political. Perhaps Nefertiti fell from favor. Maybe the tides turned within the royal court. Akhenaten, increasingly isolated, could have sidelined her, possibly in favor of another consort. Some suggest a co-ruler named Smenk Kar, an enigmatic figure who appears briefly in the historical record, may have replaced her. Was this a male heir, a half-brother, or was Smenkhare Nefertiti herself under a new name? That's the most electrifying theory, that Nefertiti didn't disappear at all. She transformed. Evidence suggests someone named Nefernuaten ruled in the final years of Akhenaten's reign. This individual used feminine grammar in inscriptions and even referenced Akhenaten as her beloved husband. Could this have been Nefertiti, crowned as pharaoh in her own right? If so, she would have joined the rarest ranks in Egyptian history, a female king like Hatshepsut before her. But even this theory dissolves in sand. Neferuaten's reign ends abruptly, and then comes a name more familiar, Tutankhamun, later Tutankhamun, a child king who would reverse his parents' reforms and restore the old gods. If Nefertiti did reign alone, it was short. And if she was Smenkhare or Nefernuaten, she ruled as a ghost queen, visible only in hints, half-carved carts, and broken relics, a puzzle missing its centerpiece. And so, just as suddenly as she arrived, the most powerful woman in Egypt disappears. But her legend that was just beginning to take shape. As the dust of Amana began to settle, a new figure emerged. A boy, king barely old enough to hold a scepter. His name was Tutankhamun, later changed to Tutankhamun, and he would become the most famous pharaoh in the world, not for what he did in life, but for the treasures found in his untouched tomb. But what matters here is this: who was his mother? The historical records are frustratingly silent. His father was almost certainly Akhenaten, but the identity of his mother remains shrouded in confusion. Some scholars argue that Nefertiti was his stepmother. Others speculate she may have been his biological mother, pointing to art and timing that seems to place him as a young child during her final public appearances. If Nefertiti truly bore Tutankhamun, it would make sense. His early reign was clearly guided by someone with a steady hand, and his decisions to reverse his father's religious revolution may not have been entirely his own. And that's where the intrigue deepens. Who was steering the ship during Tutankhamun's fragile reign? The boy king was only about 9 when he took the throne. A child can't restore a religious empire alone. Someone was behind the scenes, someone experienced in court politics, religion, and public symbolism. Could it have been Nefertiti, ruling from the shadows? Or was it the high priest Ferd, her possible father? Or perhaps both working together to erase the chaos of Amana and return Egypt to its old gods? One of the more compelling pieces of evidence comes from a golden shrine found in Tutankhamun's tomb. It shows a woman anointing the young king, a woman with features eerily similar to Nefertiti. If that was her, it means she may not have vanished at all, but stayed at the heart of power in a more discreet form. Still, without a named tomb, without a confirmed mummy, we are left with only fragments. If she did guide Tutankhamun, her fingerprints are everywhere, but her name is gone, scrubbed from temples, left out of king lists, as though someone tried to erase the memory of a woman who once ruled like a god. And yet, the irony is rich. Tutankhamun's fame would resurrect her image, because in searching for his story, the world stumbled upon hers. For someone who stood at the center of Egypt's most radical era, queen, priestess, possible pharaoh, Nefertiti left behind no confirmed tomb. Not a single monument bears her death rites, no sarcophagus, no Ereri mask, no inscription whispering her final words to the gods. It's as though she evaporated. This absence has haunted Egyptologists for over a century. In a culture obsessed with the afterlife, where every noble was embalmed, mummified, and buried with instructions for the soul's journey, how could one of the most powerful women in Egyptian history be lost? Theories abound. One possibility is that she was buried hastily and without ceremony in the waning years of the Amana period. Perhaps her radical legacy made her dangerous in the eyes of the new regime. Her tomb may have been dismantled, her name defaced, part of the sweeping effort to erase the memory of Akhenaten's heresy. After all, the return to traditional gods was swift, and vengeance in stone, cut hieroglyphs, was common. Another, more tantalizing theory suggests her tomb was never truly lost. It was simply misidentified or still hidden. Some researchers propose that she lies within the Valley of the Kings itself, concealed behind the walls of Tutan's tomb. In 2015, radar scans of KV-62, the famed tomb of King Tut, indicated possible hidden chambers. Was Nefertiti buried just inches away, sealed off, and forgotten beneath layers of history and gold? That idea captured the world's imagination. A queen sleeping just beyond reach. Egyptologists held their breath, but further scans yielded inconclusive results. Excavations slowed, funding dried up, and once again, Nefertiti retreated into myth. Yet her absence is loud. We have her images, dozens, perhaps hundreds. Her likeness captured in stone and pigment. Her bust, now in Berlin, still gazes with unfathomable grace across museum glass, as if she knows something we don't, as if she's waiting. Every year, new digs continue in Amana and the valley. Every year, whispers stir. Could a sealed chamber finally give up her secrets? Could a cartoon and forgotten sand spell her true name? Or is she destined to remain the eternal riddle, an unfinished sentence in the story of Egypt? If history buried her, it didn't succeed for long, because the search for Nefertiti never truly stopped. It only deepened. If her tomb was never found and her body never identified, why do we still remember Nefertiti? The answer sits behind museum glass beneath soft lights in Berlin's Noise Museum, a painted limestone sculpture that has captivated the world since its rediscovery in 1912. The bust of Nefertiti. She gazes forward with poise and serenity, her long neck graceful, her blue crown distinct, and her features so refined they almost feel modern. One eye is unfinished, perhaps left that way intentionally, or perhaps a forgotten detail during the workshop's final days. Yet even incomplete, she is timeless, unforgettable. The bust was discovered by German archaeologist Ludwig Borchardt in the ruins of the sculptor Thutmose studio at Amana. When he brushed away the dust and revealed her face, he knew instantly what he had found. In his diary, he wrote, "No use describing it. You have to see it." And once the world did, Nefertiti became not just a historical figure, but a global symbol of beauty, of power, of ancient enigma. But even her bust is not without controversy. Germany acquired the artifact during a time of loose antiquities laws, and Egypt has been requesting its return for decades. To the Egyptians, she belongs home in the land whose sun once touched her skin, where she stood beneath the Ten's rays. But Germany has refused. They claim her fragility makes her unsafe to travel. Others say it's about prestige. Nefertiti brings in crowds. She is, after all, their Mona Lisa. Still, her presence, wherever she may be, has changed how the world sees ancient women. She wasn't just a passive beauty. Her bust captures something regal, assertive, almost challenging. She looks like someone who held secrets, made decisions, changed the course of empires. And she did. It's remarkable how a single sculpture, delicate and silent, can resurrect someone lost to time. We may never find her tomb. We may never know how she died. But through this bust, Nefertiti achieved something extraordinary. She became immortal, not in gold, but in human memory. The face may be still, but the story it tells that continues to speak louder than ever across the centuries. Nefertiti's story lives somewhere between stone and silence, between what we know and what we want to believe. Few figures in ancient history have inspired such relentless fascination and such profound mystery. She is a paradox, one of the most documented women of her time, and yet still largely unknowable. Over the centuries, she's been imagined as many things: To some, she was a goddess in human form, the living embodiment of divine beauty. To others, she was a political mastermind, the force behind the throne, perhaps even the throne itself. Some have portrayed her as a romantic figure, tragically lost in the sands of revolution. Others paint her as ambitious, even ruthless, navigating a collapsing empire with elegance and calculation. But what do we truly know? We know she was more than a royal wife. Her imagery rivals that of kings. Her presence during religious rites, royal ceremonies, and even scenes of battle reveals a woman not just beside power, but wielding it. In a patriarchal world, she carved out her own space, not through rebellion, but through presence, through poise, through sheer command of the visual and spiritual language of her time. We know she was central to one of history's boldest religious shifts. While Akhenaten may have envisioned the monotheistic sun cult, it was Nefertiti who embodied it. She was the human face of a divine ideal, the bridge between the Aten above and the people below. She didn't just serve the gods, she was their image. And we know that after her disappearance, her memory was nearly erased. The backlash against Akhenaten's regime swept her name into oblivion. Her statues were smashed. Her inscriptions were defaced. Her role in history intentionally buried. Yet here we are 3,000 years later, still whispering her name. Why? Because myth has a way of surviving where facts cannot. Because when a woman becomes both an icon and an enigma, she slips into a space where time can't reach her. Because sometimes the questions echo louder than the answers. And maybe, just maybe, that's exactly how Nefertiti wanted it. To be remembered, not explained. To be admired, not contained. To live forever, not as a woman of one tomb, but as a queen of endless speculation. More than 3 millennia have passed since Nefertiti last walked beneath Egypt's sun. Yet her shadow still stretches across our world, etched in museum glass, whispered through academic halls, splashed across the pages of novels and screens of documentaries. Unlike most historical figures, she hasn't faded into the past. If anything, she grows larger with time. There's something irresistible about her, not just the beauty. We've seen beauty before. It's the mystery. The deliberate blank spaces in her biography feel like a challenge, a taunt, as if she's daring us to try and understand her, knowing full well we never truly will. And in that way, she's become something more than historical. She's become archetypal. Every generation reinterprets Nefertiti in its own image. In the early 20th century, she was an exotic queen, mysterious and submissive. In the feminist wave, she became a symbol of female power, an ancient ruler lost to patriarchal erasure. In modern media, she's a style icon, an African queen, a political player, even a possible pharaoh. She has lived 1,000-second lives, not through facts, but through imagination. But maybe that's the most fitting afterlife of all. In ancient Egypt, immortality wasn't just about mummification. It was about memory. If your name was spoken, your image seen, your story retold, you lived on. You could travel the field of reeds, dine with the gods, exist beyond death. Nefertiti, whether by design or by chance, has achieved that. Her name is spoken across continents. Her face is one of the most recognized in human history. Her story, though fractured, still commands attention. So, in a way, her greatest legacy wasn't carved into a tomb or sealed beneath desert stone. It was this enduring curiosity. She left behind a perfect mystery, a life half seen, half erased, and wholly unforgettable. And perhaps that was her final act of power. Not just to rule an empire, not just to shape religion or raise royal daughters, but to become timeless. Nefertiti, the beautiful one who has come, never truly left. She remains here in our questions, our wonder, and our need to remember. The women history tried to forget. She lives not in gold or glory, but in the eternal act of being searched for. And what is more immortal than that? China, where the clouds hang low, and the wind hums through bamboo groves, a dragon lies coiled. But it is no myth, no fire-breathing beast of legend. This dragon is made of earth and stone carved by centuries of calloused hands and patient vision. It is the long G rice terraces, known to locals as the dragon's backbone, and its curves ripple across the mountainside like scales shimmering with water, rice, and ancient pride. From a distance, the terraces resemble a sleeping creature. Hills ripple with rhythmic precision, each layer rising and falling like the sinew of a living form. But step closer, and you'll find something even more alive. Water flows in soft whispers along carefully dug channels. Seedlings flutter in the breeze, and at dawn, the morning mist drapes the landscape like breath rising from the dragon's nostrils. These terraces weren't built in haste. Their story began over 700 years ago, when the Zhuang and Yao people, ethnic minorities with deep ties to the mountains, chose to tame the slopes rather than abandon them. Flat land was scarce. Machinery was non-existent. And so they looked to the mountain and asked a simple question: how do we feed ourselves here? The answer took generations. Armed with little more than stone tools and bamboo baskets, they carved the hills inch by inch, year by year. With each level built, they not only shaped the land, they taught it to breathe with them. Rainfall became resource. Slope became sustenance. Rice, the staple of life, began to grow where gravity once ruled. And over time, the terraces began to resemble a dragon in repose. Strong, eternal, sacred. This was more than agriculture. It was harmony, a silent pact between humans and nature. No part of the mountain was wasted, and no part was forced to bend violently. Instead, the people worked with the earth, shaping it in curves and swells, listening to the wind, following the water. Today, the dragon's backbone still feeds entire villages. But more than that, it reminds us what patience can build. In a world racing forward, here lies a dragon that was never chased, only carved, layer by layer, dream by dream. To walk among the long J rice terraces is to step into a world carved by persistence. There is no illusion here, no machine tracks, no corporate survey markers. What stretches across these mountains are the fingerprints of human endurance. Every curve, every slope, every drop of water has been arranged, stone by stone, with hands that knew the pulse of the land. Centuries ago, when the Zhuang and Yao peoples first looked upon these steep and unforgiving hillsides, they did not see obstacles. They saw opportunity. The lands were already taken, the fertile valleys already sown. But up here, amid the rugged peaks, there was possibility. If only they could make the earth listen. With no heavy tools, they began wooden shovels, stone hoes, baskets of mud and rubble carried on backs worn by time. Slowly, terraces began to form. Horizontal veins across the mountain, held in place by hand-stacked stone walls. These weren't accidental cuts into the slope. They were calculated, Each level had to be perfectly balanced, not only to hold water, but to carry it from one tier to the next without waste. One miscalculation could cause an entire section to collapse. Too steep and the water would rush. Too flat and it would stagnate. So they measured not with rulers, but with generations of intuition. Children learned from their elders. Elders watched the seasons, and the mountain, in time, gave in, not with surrender, but with trust. And the result? A landscape that defies nature by flowing with it. From the valley base to the cloud-kissed peaks, these terraces rise like a spiral staircase to the sky. They mirror the topography with elegance, almost as if the mountain grew them itself. But no, the mountain did not shape these curves. Humans did. With no engines, no concrete, no architectural degrees, just time, just trial and error. Just the belief that land, no matter how steep, can be made to serve life. Today, the terraces remain functional, still farmed, still repaired, still respected. No bulldozers, no shortcuts. The old ways survive, not because they resist the future, but because they proved something rare. That tradition, when rooted deep enough, can outlast every storm. If the dragon's backbone is muscle and bone, then water is its blood. It flows quietly, without pumps or engines, tracing ancient channels that slip from mountaintop springs into every terrace below. This hydraulic choreography is no accident. It is the secret life of the terraces, the reason they've endured for centuries. At the top of the mountain, rainwater and natural springs are caught in narrow ditches and earthen canals. From there, gravity becomes the farmer's silent ally. The water descends through terrace after terrace, pooling gently in each field before spilling into the next. This design, fluid, seamless, ensures that every patch of rice receives what it needs. No more, no less. There are no valves, no switches. Control lies in subtle gates made of stone or wood, adjusted by hand and habit. If one terrace overflows, it could flood the next. If one leaks, a drought may follow. And so the villagers, guardians of this delicate system, walk the ridges daily, checking, adjusting, listening to the sound of flow. It's less like farming, more like playing an instrument. One wrong note, and the whole song is off. But the water does more than feed rice. It mirrors the sky. In spring, when the terraces are first flooded, the paddies turn to glass. They reflect the clouds, the sun, even the stars on a clear night. Visitors often describe the sight as surreal, like the mountain has become a living mirror, reflecting both heaven and earth. Then comes summer. The water thickens with stalks of green. The reflection fades, replaced by movement. Rippling rice plants, swaying in the wind like an emerald sea. In autumn, the water glistens through the gold of ripened grain. And in winter, when farming ceases, snow and frost replace the flowing current. The dragon sleeps, but the channels remain, quiet veins awaiting spring. Time moves differently here, not by hours, but by moisture, by the first trickle of mountain thaw, by the sound of frogs returning, by the scent of wet soil. In a world that measures time in seconds, the people of Longji still measure it in seasons and drops. And so the dragon lives not in fire and flight, but in ripples of water, pulsing gently through a living masterpiece of stone and soil. Spring in the long G mountains begins not with blossoms, but with water. As the snow melts in the higher peaks, streams trickle downward, breathing life into the waiting terraces. The mirror-like paddies are ready. The dragon stirs, and the people prepare for the ritual that ties them to every generation before them, planting the first seed. There is no grand announcement, only quiet movement. Farmers, young and old, rise with the mist. They walk barefoot along the narrow ridges, straw hats low over their eyes, baskets balanced on their backs. The air is thick with the scent of soaked soil and mountain wind. The paddies flooded just days earlier now shimmer like polished jade. This is not a task for machines. It never has been. Each rice seedling grown in nursery beds is transplanted by hand, one by one, line by line. The workers step into the cold water and press the tender stalks into the mud with gentle fingers. It's a rhythm that feels almost sacred. Back bent, arm out, hand press, repeat all day, sometimes for weeks. Children follow, splashing in the shallows, mimicking their elders. They learn not from textbooks, but by standing in the water, feeling the resistance of mud, learning the spacing by eye. It's how knowledge survives here, lived, not spoken. Planting is more than labor. It is ceremony. Offerings are made to the mountain spirits. Songs are sung. In some villages, elders scatter the first handful of seedlings as a blessing. Every field planted is a promise to the land, to the ancestors, to the children yet to come. The pace is unhurried. No one rushes the dragon. No one races the mountain. Instead, the rhythm of planting becomes a meditation, a slow dance of human and nature, of patience and purpose. And as the days pass, green shoots begin to rise from the watery fields like whispers. From this moment forward, the terraces will grow, not just rice, but hope. Each seed is a prayer, each row a quiet defiance against hunger and haste. And so begins the cycle once again, not with noise or fire, but with hands in mud and hearts in the sky. The dragon is awake, the mountain breathes, and the future is planted, one seed at a time, scattered along the ridgeal lines and nestled in the crooks of the terraces are the heartbeats of the dragon's backbone. Villages like Pingan, Dai, and Jingen. These are not just settlements. They are living museums of heritage where every home, path, and balcony clings to the mountain like a memory that refuses to fade. The houses are built of timber, resting on stilts to protect them from the rains and the steepness of the slope. Their rooftops, dark and slanted, mirror the lines of the terraces they overlook. From above, they seem like wooden lanterns floating on waves of green. Inside, life is simple, warm, and deeply communal. Generations share a home. Meals are cooked over wood fires. The smell of rice wine and bamboo smoke drifts into the mountain air. The people here belong to ethnic minorities, the Zhuang and the Red Yao, each with their own language, customs, and stories. You'll recognize the Yao women instantly. Their long black hair, uncut since childhood, is coiled into elegant shapes atop their heads. Some let it fall like silk waterfalls when they bathe in the river. A scene so graceful it borders on myth. Despite modernization creeping up the mountain trails, traditions hold strong. Hand-woven clothes dyed in indigo. Wooden looms creaking in quiet rooms. Music played on reed pipes and bronze drums during village festivals. Weddings still involve ritual dances. The harvest is still welcomed with song. Hospitality is not a transaction here. It's a reflex. Guests are offered tea, brewed from local leaves, rice wine in carved gourds, and stories passed down from elders who remember the mountain before electricity arrived. They speak of dragons in the mist, of ancestors who first carved the hills, of spirits who still guard the fields. And though tourism now brings visitors from every corner of the world, the rhythm of village life continues, largely undisturbed. The rice still grows. The rituals still mark the seasons. The terraces, like the people, endure, not by resisting change, but by absorbing it slowly, carefully, like water descending one level at a time. Here, within the dragon's coils, life is not rushed. It flows, it echoes, it remembers. To walk the terraces of Long Ji is to walk through layers of myth. The hills are not just soil and stone. They're alive with stories whispered through bamboo groves and carried on the wind. For the villagers, these mountains are not merely land. They are sacred beings, shaped by gods, guarded by spirits, and inhabited by tales passed from one generation to the next. The most enduring legend speaks of a sleeping dragon whose body stretches across the ridges. Its spine rises in coils, the very terraces themselves. Locals believe that the curves of the mountain are not man-made, but rather the dragon's scales rising and falling with breath. When mist rolls in from the valley and covers the paddies in white, it's said the dragon stirs, breathing gently in its sleep. Another tale tells of how the terraces were born from divine generosity. In a time of famine, the ancestors climbed the mountains and prayed to the heavens. Moved by their devotion, the gods sent rain and instructed them to carve the hills into steps so rice could grow. The people obeyed, and the dragon appeared to guide their hands. Ever since, they have honored the mountain with respect, never shouting in the fields, never cutting trees without prayer. These beliefs are not written in books. They live in songs sung during the planting, in incense burned before a new growing season, in the silence kept during misty mornings. Children grow up hearing these tales not as fantasy, but as truth embedded in the land. To laugh at the dragon is to risk bad harvest. To disrespect the spirits is to invite flood or drought. There are spirits in the water too. Some farmers still make offerings before releasing the spring water into the terraces for the first time each year. A few drops of rice wine, a prayer murmured under breath. Not for show, just tradition as natural as tying a shoe. And whether you believe in dragons or not, something sacred hangs in the air. Maybe it's the silence, maybe it's the clouds, or maybe it's the quiet certainty that this place is more than human work. It's a story still being told, written not in ink, but in stone, water, and rice. For centuries, the dragon's backbone was a secret kept by the mountains, remote, quiet, and known only to those who called it home. But no place, no matter how sacred, remains untouched forever. The road came, the wires followed. Tourists, cameras, and smartphones climbed the hills alongside the farmers, and the terraces, ancient and weathered, faced a question they'd never had to answer before. How do you survive the modern world? At first, there was worry. Some feared the mountain would be sold piece by piece to developers, that concrete would replace wood, that culture would become costume. But the people of Long J didn't just endure. They adapted, not by abandoning the past, but by weaving the present into it, one careful thread at a time. Villagers began opening their homes to guests, not as resorts, but as family stays. Visitors eat local meals, sticky rice steamed in bamboo, wild greens picked that morning. They sleep in wooden stilt houses where roosters still announce the sunrise. The experience isn't curated for show. It's lived, honest, real. In the farming, it continues. Each season, locals still flood the terraces, still plant by hand, still harvest with sickles worn smooth by time. Children attend school by day, but help in the fields at dusk. Tourism may bring income, but rice brings life. One supports the other. Both are essential. Some young villagers have left for the cities, but many return. There is something magnetic about the terraces, something deeper than nostalgia. It's the sound of water sliding through the channels, the way the stars reflect in the paddies, the way the mountains teach patience. Local festivals have grown louder. Yes, there are now microphones where there were once drums. Signs in Mandarin and English stand beside sacred springs. But the rituals still happen. Offerings are still made. Elders still lead the songs. The dragon's backbone didn't resist change. It absorbed it with grace, with balance. The terraces remain not because they are frozen in time, but because they breathe with time, flexing, adjusting, but never breaking. In an age where tradition is often sacrificed for progress, Long G stands as quiet proof that progress can walk gently if it chooses. That the old ways still have room in the modern world, especially when they are this beautiful. The dragon's backbone is never the same place twice. With each season, it sheds its skin, transforms its colors, shifts its mood. While cities change in years, the terraces change in weeks, draped not just in light, but in rhythm. To stand among them through a full year is to witness a mountain breathe. Spring arrives like a mirror. The terraces are flooded in preparation for planting, and the still water reflects the sky like silver glass. Clouds drift not just above, but below your feet. Visitors speak of walking through heaven. The fields look empty, but they're full of potential. Beneath the surface, life is stirring. Summer brings a burst of green. The rice shoots stretch tall and straight, blanketing the hills in an emerald cascade. From a distance, the terraces look like ribbons of velvet rolling in every direction. The air is warm and wet. Frogs call from the paddies. Farmers, knee-deep in water, work from dawn till dusk, their hats bobbing like tiny sails on a jade sea. Autumn is gold, harvest time. The rice matures, and the terraces catch fire in the sunlight, glowing with grain. The fields ripple in the wind, and drums echo through the villages. Families gather, songs are sung, sticky rice is cooked. It's not just a season, it's a celebration. The dragon, fully awake, offers its bounty. Winter draws the mountain into stillness. The terrace is empty. The water drains. Snow sometimes falls, dusting the steps in soft white. Other times, frost clings to the walls like lace. There are no tools in the field, no voices, only silence. The dragon sleeps, resting, waiting. Each season writes a different poem. Spring reflects, summer grows, autumn feeds, winter rests. The beauty of Longyi isn't just in its shape, but in its cycle, in how it accepts time without resistance, in how it transforms quietly, never needing to announce itself. Photographers chase the light here, hoping to capture something eternal. But the terraces don't freeze for anyone. They move. They breathe. They teach us softly that beauty is not static. It's a rhythm, a practice, a promise renewed with every season. And so the dragon turns again, not with roar or flame, but with water, grain, and wind. In the end, the terraces are more than fields. They are a vow, quiet, curved, and carved into the mountainside. a promise passed down from hand to hand, season to season, generation to generation. The dragon's backbone is not just a wonder of agriculture or a masterpiece of engineering. It is the story of what happens when humans choose to live with the land, not against it. There were easier paths. The ancestors of Long could have moved to valleys, chased flatter ground, but they stayed. They studied the slope, listened to the stone, followed the water, and in doing so, they made the impossible ordinary, feeding villages on a mountainside. Every curve holds a lesson, not just about rice, but about patience, about legacy, about care. These terraces weren't built in years or even decades. They took centuries. There is no shortcut to harmony, no machine that can replicate the knowledge etched into each stone wall by calloused hands and quiet persistence. And yet nothing about them is frozen. The terraces are alive. They evolve. They bend with the weather, with the needs of the people, with the shape of the world. That's their secret. They were never rigid. They were always fluid. Even now, as the modern world climbs the hills with its signals and screens, the terraces remain grounded. They change, but they do not vanish, because their roots are not just in soil. They are in story, in ritual, in the simple, enduring act of planting a seed and trusting the sky. To walk the dragon's backbone is to witness a contract between humans and the earth, a contract signed with sweat and sun, renewed with every harvest. It's a reminder that progress does not always mean speed, and that greatness doesn't always roar. Sometimes it murmurs like a stream slipping over stone. And perhaps that is why the terraces speak to so many, from farmers to travelers to dreamers, because they represent what we've nearly forgotten, that the most lasting things in this world are not built with force, but with rhythm, humility, and time. The dragon sleeps, the people endure, and the mountain remembers. Most visitors to Giza lift their eyes to the sky, drawn to the towering silhouettes of the pyramids and the gaze of the Great Sphinx. But few ask what lies beneath, under the sand, under the Nile, under centuries of forgotten currents. For in the quiet shallows near the ancient village of Abu Rash, just a short distance from the Giza Plateau, a strange tale stirs. It speaks of something enormous, eroded and ignored, an underwater sphinx. Local fishermen have whispered of it for generations, a smooth-backed shape that seems too symmetrical to be natural, a feline form half buried in mud and waterlogged sediment. When the Nile's waters recede during droughts, parts of it emerge. Stone curves, grooves, and what some say is a carved pore, impossibly worn, but unmistakably shaped by hands. It doesn't sit among the tourist routes. There are no guideposts, no velvet ropes, no tour buses idling nearby. Just an area thick with reeds, brackish water, and silence. Explorers who ventured there claim the land itself feels different, charged as if memory clings to it. Beneath the murk, sonar scans have picked up geometric patterns and what appear to be blocks placed with intent. But what truly startles are the claims that this figure, a sphinx-like formation submerged near Giza, may predate the pyramids entirely, not by decades, but by millennia. If true, it would shatter the established chronology of Egyptian civilization. The mainstream timeline anchors the Great Sphinx at around 2500 BCE, but this underwater form, if genuinely carved, could belong to an age when the Sahara was still green, and the Nile ran wild through a wetter, lusher land. Skeptics, of course, dismiss it as a misidentified rock formation. Limestone, shaped by water and wishful thinking. But the grooves, the curves, the alignment with celestial markers, it all invites more questions than answers. The site remains unexcavated. Official archaeologists have largely ignored it. Perhaps it's nothing. Perhaps it's everything. A relic not just of Egypt's past, but of a world lost to flood and time. For now, the so-called underwater Sphinx lies quiet, not sleeping, waiting. And if it could speak, one wonders what secrets it would tell, and why so many seem determined not to listen. The legend of the underwater Sphinx moved from whispered folklore to global curiosity in the 1980s. That's when a few independent researchers and divers began publishing strange reports. Accounts of a massive lion-bodied figure partially submerged near the Giza Plateau. Early photographs were grainy, inconclusive, and often dismissed. But they sparked something that couldn't be put back in the bottle: curiosity, and more dangerously, doubt. One of the most vocal early proponents was an amateur Egyptologist who claimed to have seen a weathered monument deep beneath silt and flood layers during a brief drought window. According to him, the figure wasn't an isolated rock or erosion trick. It had geometry, legs, symmetry, even the faint suggestion of a carved face. Naturally, this challenged the traditional narrative. Egyptology as a discipline rests on structure and established timelines. Most historians date the construction of the Giza pyramids and the Great Sphinx to around 2500 BCE, during the reign of Pharaoh Khafre. The idea that another Sphinx, older and partially submerged, might exist would demand not just a revision of Egyptian history, but a reshaping of humanity's entire timeline. Mainstream scholars reacted with restraint, and in some cases, outright skepticism. Without sanctioned excavation, carbon dating, or stratigraphic evidence, the claim could not be treated as fact. Many argued that the so-called underwater Sphinx was nothing more than a natural rock formation, its shape carved by millennia of Nile flooding and sediment erosion. In Egypt, they noted, nature often imitates intent. Wind, water, and time are master sculptors. Yet the photographs continued to circulate. The sonar scans kept returning strange readings, too uniform, too smooth, too deliberate to dismiss. That's when the theorists stepped in. Writers, filmmakers, and alternative historians spun narratives around the mystery. A relic from a forgotten civilization, perhaps Atlantean, perhaps pre-dynastic Egyptian, swallowed by an ancient flood that reshaped the Sahara. They highlighted the water-worn surfaces of the Great Sphinx itself, argued for lost technologies, and hinted that what lay beneath the Nile might be far older than recorded history. The debate swelled, but the ground stayed silent. No official excavation followed. No museum claimed it. Whatever it is, stone or statue, remains buried in silt, suspended between myth and mud. The suggestion that something near Giza could predate the pyramids isn't just intriguing, it's seismic. If the submerged structure is more than erosion, Egypt's story doesn't begin with the 4th dynasty. It begins deep in prehistory, when the Sahara was lush savanna and the Nile wandered, untamed and unpredictable. This possibility gained traction in the 1990s when geologist Dr. Robert Schoch examined the Great Sphinx itself. He argued that the deep vertical weathering around its enclosure wasn't the work of wind and sand, but of heavy, sustained rainfall. Rain that hadn't touched the Giza Plateau since at least 7000 BCE. That estimate pushed the monument's origins back thousands of years, well before the first pharaohs carved their names into stone. If water shaped the original Sphinx, could water also have hidden an older sibling? The alleged underwater Sphinx sits in a low-lying basin near ancient floodplains. Satellite imagery and ground-penetrating radar hint at rectangular outlines, foundation-like shapes, and deliberate carving now buried beneath mud and seasonal water. Some see in these patterns the echo of a monument older than writing, older than dynasties, created when Egypt's story existed only in stone and memory. Critics dismiss the theory as romantic speculation. They argue that the idea of a pre-literate culture carving such a monument stretches plausibility. But is it impossible? At Göbekli Tepe in Turkey, hunter-gatherers raised monumental stone pillars around 9600 BCE, thousands of years before Stonehenge. If they could mark the land in stone, could Egypt hide a similar secret? If real, the underwater Sphinx wouldn't just be a ruin, it would be evidence of a forgotten epic, perhaps a cultural ancestor whose whispers reached the builders of Giza. Stone does not lie, it remembers. And in the silt and water around the alleged site, the stone seems to murmur a story, not just of time, but of floods and loss. Sediment layers, erosion patterns, and water-worn grooves point to a history far older than the desert we see now. Geologists studying images from the Abu Rawash area note rounded channels carved not by sand or wind, but by flowing water. Rainfall and flood forces absent here for thousands of years. Similar arguments have been made about the Great Sphinx itself, whose enclosure bears vertical fissures resembling precipitation erosion. Now, the same signature seems etched into the submerged site, hidden under a shallow flood basin. During dry spells, when the Nile's waters retreat, reports claim pieces of the structure break the surface. Lion-like shoulders, a curved back, a foundation too level to be natural. The surrounding soil tells a story of violent fluctuations in ancient water tables. The wear follows the contours of the shape itself, as if the stone had been sculpted, then drowned. Skeptics counter that this is coincidence, a trick of erosion and imagination. But water does not carve symmetry. It does not align foundations. It does not accidentally mimic the geometry of a sphinx just miles away. So why hasn't it been excavated? Why does it remain under mud and mystery? Part of the answer lies in Egypt's guardianship of its past. Excavations require state approval, funding, and overwhelming evidence. Above all, they require adherence to an unwritten rule. Don't rewrite Egypt's history without proof beyond dispute. The underwater Sphinx has never received an official, state-sponsored dig. Independent researchers have studied it, but without formal backings, their findings remain speculative. There's also the Nile itself. The river is restless. It floods and shifts, submerging the site for much of the year. Draining and stabilizing the basin would take years. And beyond the technical challenges lie political ones. A find of this magnitude would shake academic and national narratives alike. Egypt's Ministry of Antiquities favors discoveries that reinforce glory, not those that raise uncomfortable questions. Some whisper that private studies may have already been done, locked away from public eyes. But without evidence, such talk drifts into conspiracy. And so, the monument, if it is one, sleeps. A silent irony. In a country dedicated to preserving its ancient heritage, one of its greatest mysteries may sit ignored, hidden, in plain sight. To the ancient Egyptians, the Sphinx was more than stone. With a lion's body and human head, it embodied strength bound to wisdom, power fused with intellect. It stood as guardian, as god, as riddle. The Great Sphinx of Giza, 66 feet tall, has watched the rising sun for over 4,000 years. Its origins are debated still. Khafre's monument or something older, its face recarved across ages. If a second Sphinx lies submerged nearby, water-worn and perhaps older, it would rewrite everything. No ancient record mentions twin sphinxes at Giza, yet symmetry is sacred in Egyptian design. Temples stood flanked by twin statues, kakus, twin obelisks, twin lions. Why not twin guardians? Some speculate this isn't a copy at all, but the prototype, a pre-dynastic monument that inspired the later Sphinx. If so, it suggests the idea predates the pharaohs entirely, born of a culture whose myths outlived its name. Its purpose could have been astronomical, ritualistic, or commemorative. In Egyptian symbology, lions mark the horizon, the gate of dawn. A sphinx facing east enshrines eternal rebirth. Imagine, when carved before the pyramids, watching the sun long before Khafre's chisels touch stone. The notion is both unsettling and exhilarating. As whispers of the underwater sphinx spread, a fault line has opened. On one side, Orthodox Egyptology, disciplined, cautious, demanding evidence. On the other, independent researchers and seekers convinced something extraordinary lies beneath the silt. Scholars warn of natural formations misread as monuments. Investigators argue that dismissing anomalies is just as dangerous. The debate is no longer just academic. It's emotional. It asks how we approach the past. Do we only accept what's proven, or dare to follow hints into the unknown? The submerged Sphinx has become less a monument than a question, a mirror reflecting our hunger to know and our fear of being wrong. Whether natural rock or carved relic, its power is already clear. It makes us wonder, and in that wondering lies its greatest gift. Because maybe the oldest things aren't just buried in sand or stone. Maybe they're buried in us, in our urge to explore, to remember, and to believe that beneath water and time, the past still waits, silent and patient, for someone to listen.